Great news there that Stage 1 has successfully landed back at Landing Zone 1 in Florida.
And Stage 2 continues to propel Dragon and our Crew 7 crew members. We now are coming up on SECO, second stage engine cutoff. Again, looking at that about 8 minutes and 50 seconds into the flight. As planned today, now traveling over 13,000 miles per hour. Again, we're looking for eventually a good orbital insertion at which we'll be traveling. Good calls here at Mission Control in Hawthorne. And we are standing by for second stage engine cutoff.
Copy, Shannon.
Heard that call for the call out for Shannon, Ireland, the final abort zone.
MVAC shutdown.
There's audio confirmation, and you can see on your screen that we have had successful second engine cutoff 1 of our MVAC engine.
Dragon SpaceX nominal orbit insertion. Dragon.
And good news there that Crew 7.
Nominal orbital insertion.
Dragon SpaceX launch
Awesome to hear.
Disarmed.
Fantastic.
That's the first look at the crew, now in microgravity, confirmation of a good Earth orbit insertion. We are now coming up on 10 minutes into the flight. Of course, we saw second stage engine cutoff, and you're actually getting a look at their zero-G indicator there. For them to tell us a little bit more about that shortly, but we are also standing by for second stage separation from Dragon.
Acquisition of signal in Finland.
So as Leah mentioned, right now, Dragon and Stage 2 are still attached. Great views of that zero-G indicator there. And what we're doing right now is basically letting any residual dynamics of the vehicle settle out prior to separation. We are expecting that separation event in probably about 90 seconds. Crew looks like they're having a great time up in space, too.
And as we stand by for that separation, shortly thereafter, we'll be looking for the nose cone to begin deploying. That command will be sent, and we'll see it open shortly after. We'll need the nose cone to open to expose those forward bulkhead thrusters, as well as the docking mechanism with which they will use to link up with the International Space Station. After their ride, it's almost 30 hours long. Again, we had liftoff right on time today at 3:27 a.m. Eastern Time. The crew making a smooth journey into orbit. It's now been 11 minutes, 20 seconds since that liftoff. We had confirmation of good orbital insertion, and we are standing by for second stage separation from Dragon.
Great views of Mission Control here in Hawthorne, California. And the SpaceX team standing in the background, standing by for Dragon separation. Of course, you also have continued and Stage 2 in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen.
Dragon separation confirmed. Crew 7, on behalf of the Falcon team, I'd like to welcome you to orbit, and we hope you enjoyed the ride on Falcon 9. Space travel is difficult, even though you make it look easy, so thank you for trusting us to get you up there. It's not a bad way to spend a day in the office. Stand by for words from the launch director.
Hello, Crew 7. This is Launch Director here on Countdown. On behalf of the entire SpaceX Launch and Recovery team, I'm honored to welcome Dragon's first ever all-international crew to orbit. Счастливого пути, Gotor, Iterashai. Godspeed, Crew 7. Cheers.
SpaceX, thanks for the ride. It was awesome. On behalf of Andy, Satoshi, Toshi, and I, we'd like to thank the multitude of people who've led us to this unique moment. We may have members on board from 4 different nations, Denmark, Japan, Russia, and the USA, but we're a united team with a common mission. We hope the work we do serves to benefit our beautiful home planet and those on it. As you said, human spaceflight requires an unparalleled level of vigilance and rigor, and we thank all those who prepared not only us, but also this truly impressive spacecraft for flight. Finally, to our families, carry the greater burden of our choice to explore. Thank you. Go Crew 7. Awesome ride.
Really incredibly moving words from Commander Jasmin Moghbeli now that she and her international team are up in space. That is going to end our coverage from Hawthorne until we pick back up with our docking coverage, like Leah mentioned, just about 30 hours from now. But for now, I'm going to hand it back over to Daryl and Jessica at Kennedy Space Center to wrap up our launch coverage tonight.
All right, thank you very much, and great job. And Jessica, what a launch.
It was spectacular. Bright launches are something to see. You see all those bright lights, you see those little nitrogen pulses when that first stage is coming back down. Spectacular.
Phenomenal roar, the thunder, you could feel it in your chest. And then, of course, the booster came back and landed, and that was some extra pop.
Pretty impressive all around. Sights, sounds, and even those feelings.
That's new, of course, to crew, to NASA crew, is bringing the booster back. NASA decided they have a lot of prop margin. Propellant that is, and so they burn the first stage a little less and the second stage a little more, and allows them to bring the first stage back and back to land, which is good to see. And so you saw the zero-G indicator floating around. Tell us what it was.
I did. Well, that, Daryl, was a 3-toed sloth. Important distinction, not a 2-toed sloth.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Apparently, this is one of Andy's kids' favorite animals. And as a family, they were even fortunate enough to see one in the wild in Costa Rica last Christmas when they were on vacation. So it was all kind of fate leading up to this, I think.
How about that? This is Andy Mogensen.
Andy Mogensen, the pilot. That's correct. That's right. And I guess his family calls him the slowest person in the world. So another reason why this 3-toed sloth had such meaning for all of them.
Well, that actual sloth in the capsule looked like it was moving slow as well, but he's got an excuse.
You know, we have a saying in space, and it's often true. Yeah. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And when you rush too much, especially in space, doing a spacewalk or anything that you're doing, you get in trouble. So slow is smooth, and smooth is fast.
Wise words from our veteran space flyer, Jessica Meir, sorry. It's early. Hey, we got some social questions. Let's take a few. You do mind?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's look on our screen here, and here we've got one that says, come Sunday morning. Beautiful shot right there, though, of the spacecraft looking out the back. Boy, that is high-resolution image. Come Sunday morning, Earth Eastern Time, what are the first few tasks the crew will do, and how will they best acclimate and get dialed into their mission?
When we wake up in the morning on board the space station, we open up our computer and we have a plan that lays out our entire schedule for the day, whether it's scientific experiments, hardware, maintenance, whatever it is that you need to get done. I know what this crew will be doing. One of the first things they do, of course, is a safety briefing. So we want to make sure that they have all of the information they need in case they had any kind of situation on the space station where maybe they needed an emergency breathing mask or a fire extinguisher, anything like that. Safety first at NASA, and that's the first thing that we do when you arrive on board the space station as well. The veteran crew that is up there will take them through that, show them where everything is, talk through some of the main messages, and then they'll have a longer session usually the next day or later that week. They'll get into their crew quarters. Usually your crewmates will do a favor for you and unpack some of your things so you don't have to do all that when you get there. You arrive to your crew quarters and already have some of the things that you need out, maybe even some pictures from home. When I arrived, my crewmates had really taken great care of me. They had decorated my crew quarters. I had pictures of my friends and family. Everything was all laid out, and that really had a nice, smooth transition, because those first few moments in space, especially when you've never been there before as a rookie, you're not quite that graceful yet. You know, you don't have your space wings quite yet, and you're getting used to just moving around and being in that three-dimensional microgravity environment.
And so you're talking about, you know, getting used to the environment up there, and having a little something from home is important too. You took up a flight kit. These astronauts all have a flight kit. You, in fact, brought a few things that you took up into space. What were a couple of the more meaningful ones that you took?
I did. You know, we often pictures of family and friends, like we've talked about before, or things that represent places we've been and worked. I brought up a picture of my wedding photo of my parents. Unfortunately, my father had passed away before I went to space, so I wanted to have a piece of him up there with me. I brought up some things to represent other things along the way. My home state of Maine. I had a university from my undergraduate university.
Yeah.
Sometimes we bring up presents for each other because we're up there for birthdays or holidays. Drew Morgan, my crewmate, brought us these harmonicas.
Nice harmonica. And briefly, let's look at the screen here. We can see that the nose cone is deploying, and we have confirmation of it deploying. Beautiful shot there. Of course, the nose cone has to deploy in order for Dragon to connect up to the International Space Station. And once this clears out of the way, it is quite a view. Depending on where Earth is in relation. Okay, looks like we're pointed in space, which makes sense. Sometimes you get an Earth view.
There's a lot of space in space.
There is. There certainly is indeed. And then what else? Oh, you got some
Personal kind of selfish item that wasn't for anybody else was my panda. This is Pandemonium.
Oh,
I've had him since I was 5 years old.
Pandemonium.
So he made his way to space with me as well, and we saw a lot of stuffed animals floating with these zero-G indicators. We saw that three-toed sloth, but Pandemonium was up there floating in all of his glory as well. And, you know, these are all just things that remind us of home and really help us share the mission with everybody back home. All of these places and things that have meant something to us along the way, because we did not get there alone. We got there with the support of so many people that helped us. And this mission is for everyone. It's really for all of humankind. So hopefully they can all share in.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing your flight kit with us. This is especially, I mean, this is a 40-year-old tour.
41 now, yeah.
That's
He's
great.
been around the block.
He just said he wants to go back to space.
He does want to go, but we all want to go back to space. So hopefully he'll have another opportunity.
We just got confirmation that nose cone is fully deployed, and so Dragon is on its way to the International Space Station. Now, a member of Crew 7 will kick off a major study that will give us a comprehensive look at how the human body is affected by time and space. Let's bring in now NASA's Jasmin Moghbeli for more.
As we saw this morning, the Commercial Crew Program launches astronauts from American soil, and this enables NASA's human research on the International Space Station. Joining us now to talk more about that is Kurt Costello, ISS Chief Program Scientist. Thank you for joining us, Kurt.
Thanks, Jasmine. It's great to be here this morning.
We are glad to have you here. So how does the Commercial Crew Program better enable NASA's human research?
So the Commercial Crew Program has enabled us to launch again from U.S. soil. And what that means is a lot of our sensitive science that needs to be loaded within the last few hours before we launch can now be quickly transported from our labs here at KSC to the vehicle on the launch pad. So this enables us a late load capability that allows us to get our samples, critical samples, onto the vehicles. And the Commercial Crew Program has also enabled us to launch more frequently and regularly. So a lot of our sensitive investigations that need specific timing for when we get those samples to the space station and then back down are enabled by that program.
That is great, Kurt. And can you tell us a little bit more about the new human research investigation going to be part of Crew 7?
Sure. I think you're referring to CIPHER, and CIPHER is not just one investigation, but 14 in one. And what it is really setting out to do is to help us understand whether we have risks
from my wife.
to humans being in space
I'm always
for longer than 6
the
months.
last to leave the house whenever we're going anywhere. Personally, I think it's with good reason. But they say I'm the slowest person alive, which is also why it's a 3-toed sloth, not a 2-toed sloth, because apparently that would be too fast for me. So welcome to space, Sasha the sloth.
And Dragon, we appreciate the introduction to your zero-G indicator and noting that that is probably officially now the fastest sloth ever.
This is Satoshi. It's nice to be in space, and I'm very glad to see happy faces. 日本の皆さん、国際宇宙ステーションへ、再びして着実に仕事をしてきます。
Yes, I'm very excited. First of all, a few words in Russian, then in English. Всем большое спасибо, огромное восхищение тем, как мы прокатились на ракете, мы в космосе. Невероятно. Полет в космос – это результат действий скоординированных тысяч людей, которые работают в разных странах. Всем большое спасибо. Roscosmos, NASA, ESA, JAXA, SpaceX. Моим друзьям и семье большое спасибо. Thank you very much for all your hard work. SpaceX, Roscosmos, NASA, ESA, JAXA, and all the partners involved in manned space flight. That's a profound example of how much we can achieve working together in harmony. Let's continue. Cool. Thanks a lot to everyone, to my family as well. Thanks.
Copies all. Thank you for the kind words. And Jaws, if you are ready to copy, I do have some upcoming words on the phase burn.
Expect a loss of signal. Good, Hilly.
SpaceX Dragon is ready to copy.
Okay, wanted to give you an update that we are going to be losing TDRS for voice comms for about 15, that's approximately 15 minutes, which is going to include that upcoming phase burn per your displays. We do have a ground station pass during that burn prep, so you will actually be able to call us in the blind. However, you will be LOS during the burn. There's no concerns, but we'll pick you back up at 0819 Zulu, which will be right after the burn, and we'll confirm that burn performance. How copy?
SpaceX Dragon copies all. We'll lose you on TDRS for the phase burn, but we can make calls via the ground station, and we'll catch you on the backside at 0819.
Good readback.
Okay, you just heard some communication between Commander Jasmin Moghbeli and SpaceX's launch team. Just saying they're going to lose TDRS connectivity, which will, during the burn, they'll be unable to communicate, but they've got a ground station that will catch them on either side of that. So communication will be established before and after the burn. Earlier, we heard some words from Andy Mogensen. Of course, you told us that that was a sloth. Wasn't sure that we were going to be able to, get some words from him, but it was good to hear from him and the other crew members about, now that they're in space and sharing a message with the world.
Absolutely, and we got a name, Sasha the sloth.
Sasha the sloth. The fastest moving sloth ever to be a sloth.
Yeah, among legendary, famous stuffed animals in space.
That's
now.
right.
It's a thing.
Long list of them, and so Jasmin, Andreas, Satoshi, and Konstantin are on course to arrive at the International Space Station around 8:39 Eastern Time tomorrow. NASA TV, well, we will be wrapping up our coverage, but you can follow along with Crew 7's entire ride to the station and hear real-time audio from that space to ground, which we were listening to just then, on our mission audio stream on YouTube. Make sure you look for the link on our NASA social media accounts and in the description of the NASA YouTube launch broadcast. And though our coverage here at Kennedy Space Center is concluding, Crew 7's mission has only just begun. They'll get to the International Space Station in about 30 hours. It's going to be a long ride. But then they'll be able to meet and join, I should say, Crew 7 to Crew 6, and that'll be quite a ceremony.
Absolutely. You know, these first missions, these first moments in space are absolutely unforgettable. I'll never forget that feeling weightlessness for the first time. Still strapped in your seat, but everything starts lifting up, your arms, your pencils, anything that was on the floor, the zero-G indicator, everything. And I remember looking across at my crewmate, just sharing those moments and those smiles. I know how happy that crew is right now. I am so excited for them and their mission. It will take a little while, 30 hours, like you said, to get to space station, but they are in space right now, and I know they're enjoying every minute. Congratulations, Crew 7. We are so excited for you. This is going to be an incredible mission on the International Space Station.
Great words, Jessica. Appreciate those. And Crew 6 will be coming back down in about a week. They'll have a roughly 5-day handover, and then they'll return. Next up for us is our post-launch news conference scheduled at 5 a.m. Eastern Time on NASA TV. And, of course, we'll have live joint coverage of docking and the Crew 7 welcome ceremony starting tomorrow at 6:45 a.m. Eastern Time on NASA TV, as well as SpaceX's YouTube channel. You can find mission updates on X, at NASA, at SpaceX, at nasa.gov, including, again, the link to that mission audio stream if you want to stick around with Crew 7 and be with them on their entire journey. Well, before we sign off from Kennedy, I want to thank Jessica Meir for being here on the launch broadcast and sharing your incredible experiences and all your insight, answering the questions, bringing pandemonium and showing them off. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having an astronaut, and especially you today on Crew 7 to share this with us.
Well, it is absolutely my pleasure. Any good day when a rocket ignites is a great day for astronauts all around the planet. So we wouldn't miss out on it for the world. Very happy to be here and excited to share this moment with all of you. Thanks so much.
And a huge thanks as well to all of our guests for joining us today, but most importantly, thank all of you for watching. For everyone here at NASA and SpaceX, have a great morning and keep looking up. We leave you now with a look back at highlights from suit up to liftoff. So we've got Crew 7, and they are doing suit checkouts. And here they come, the astronauts walking down the hallway at astronaut crew quarters. And here they come, Crew 7, taking their first steps outside before their journey to space.
Here they go. Doors are closing.
This begins the drive across NASA's Kennedy Space Center to Launch Pad 39A. And there is Jasmin Moghbeli, the commander, and Andreas Mogensen, our pilot. There go our pilot and commander, carefully getting in. And here come our mission specialists, Konstantin Borisov, and on the right, Satoshi Furukawa. has a Bachelor of Economics from the Russian Academy of Economics, a Master of Science in Operations Research and Systems Analyst from Warwick University, Coventry, UK. That's a this is the largest total number of crew, not just for the actual Crew Dragon, but we're talking about for the support systems, both on the boat that goes out to recover them, as well as the emergency operations that are standing by to support in case anything happened.
Yeah, that's a great point. Of course, we rely heavily on all the people on the ground. You know, we're the faces that you see up there and the ones that get to wear the suits and go to space, but it truly takes a huge team of all the individuals that support every aspect of our space flight. And as astronauts, we never forget that. You know, this crew probably has an incredibly extensive network all over the world as well. You know, we talked about how international they are, and Kostya, Konstantin, he's lived in 4 different countries. Andy's lived in at least 8 countries.
Wow.
So a lot of people that they've touched, I'm sure, along the way. I love the story. You know, Andy actually worked in the oil industry in Congo and Angola after he studied aerospace engineering. And it was about the same time that the movie Armageddon was coming out. So at least for him, he was doing this kind of obscure job. But finally, you know, he had this movie where he could help explain to people that there truly was a connection between his current job and his dream to be an astronaut one day.
Well, a guy from an oil rig going up into space, thank goodness he's not trying to steer a meteoroid away from hitting the Earth.
Hey, well, he will be prepared for whatever comes their way. Bruce Willis style right there.
Absolutely. And hey, Jessica, we got a question already teed up. Let's go ahead and take that from our social channels. At Savannah Brainery asks, are there any pre-launch rituals for crews?
Yeah, that's a great question. And tradition is something that we do like to uphold. We have several rituals. For example, this crew, when they leave the suit-up room, they will sign a mission patch, and all of the other crews, all the other Dragon crews have done that before them. When they leave the building, just before they get out and ride out to the launch pad and the Teslas, there are stickers that are on the outside of the crew quarters building there, and they'll sign those as well, one for each crew. There's a great story that one of the SpaceX employees told me that one time she came out for one of the launches, I think it may have been Crew 2, and it seems to happen for every launch where she saw a dragonfly land on the Dragon patch. So lots of those good luck signs along the way. The crew.
Indeed, the dragon. I've heard that. Like you see a dragonfly on launch day, that's supposed to be a good omen.
Yeah, absolutely. The crew will play a card game.
Yes.
We'll have a view of that so we can save that conversation for when we see that later, before they exit that suit room. And then in the white room, so the small room that's really at the end of that access arm before they get into the capsule, they'll sign that as well. So lots of different traditions along the way.
And I'm looking forward to that. You mentioned the card game. We're going to be showing that in a NASA broadcast for the first time that I know of. They've taken pictures of it. Certainly, there's Konstantin relaxing. And by the way, those recliners, I understand it, are from the shuttle era. So they've got some miles on them.
Yeah, again, that history and tradition is always very important to us here at NASA. You can see Joe Akaba in the blue flight suit there. He is our current chief of the astronaut office. So he's down there talking to the crew right now.
He'll be the one playing the commander of Crew 7 in a game of cards. Jasmin Moghbeli, of course.
You can see they're holding on to those little packs to the right. That's giving them some airflow so that they'll still get some cooling in the suit. You know, once you get into that garment, it can get warm in there in that pressure suit. So they're carrying their little ventilation system to help them stay cool. Looks like they're going over there now toward that card game table.
It sure does. We have some fists on the table. Looks like they're ready to play.
Yeah, so Daryl, the tradition for this card game is that they will play until the commander loses. And the idea there is that they want Jasmin, the commander, to finally lose that card game and get all that bad luck out of the way before the mission. So here they are. I see Joe's shuffling the cards now.
Shuffling the deck up. So Joe Akaba on the left, as she mentioned, chief of the astronaut office. On the right, Jasmin Moghbeli, the commander of the Crew 7 mission.
So interestingly, some of the crews have actually changed what games they play over the last several crews. So I'm not even sure what game they're playing right now, but the key is to make sure that Jasmin loses.
And by losing, they all win.
Exactly. Get that bad luck out of the way now, and then, this is just really gives us a nice moment of levity, a little bit of a laid-back atmosphere before they're really getting going and getting out to the launch pad. So like the social media question that came in, it's nice to have these traditions that are all part of the process that mean a little bit of something to us. Okay, well, Jasmin cut the deck, and now Joe is dealing. Very dramatically, I might add. I think this might be a game that involves one card. Oh, she lost already, it looks like to me. The bat. That's great. That is great news. High fives all around. Oh, they're back for more. Looks like these guys are ready to launch today. I love the smiles on their faces. A lot of enthusiasm, like you said. It gives that, moment of levity. Space flight is serious business, so it's good when you can join around the table with your crew and those who are supporting you and share a moment like this. Yeah, I can tell you the camaraderie in that room right now is really palpable. That SpaceX team that they have been training with and working with for so long now, preparing them for the flight. All of the different managers like Joe, Norm Knight we saw there in the previous frame. Lots of people that are there for them, supporting them and really enabling this space flight. All the people down to the ones that provide us with all of the things that we're going to fly up there to the space station. So a really great feeling, and I can see those genuine smiles all around tonight. And it looks like a member of the team received the official playing deck for Crew 7, which is a nice notion on their part. Yeah, great memento to have. So from here, folks, the astronauts will get some final photos. That number 34, I think, is that Sarah Gillis? It might be from SpaceX. I think that was Haley Esparza. Okay. I just walked this way. Yeah, that came towards camera. Yeah. Okay. Also, my correction. Yep, she's really the liaison between all of astronaut operations and SpaceX. So a lot of us know Haley really well. She is always a central part of all of our training and prepping for flight. She's wonderful. Number 34? Yep, that's number 34. That's Haley. Okay, very good. Giving Andy some water. Oh, yeah. I hear it is warm, right? So that you want to hydrate, but you don't want to hydrate too much. Yeah, absolutely. There's a good balance. It's a full-service operation down there, providing drinks along the way and everything. There's Satoshi's chatting with Anne McLean. And of course, this is all very, very choreographed for the timeline. They will exit that room at exactly that prescribed second and get down, do their signing, and get into the elevator. Right, and they are not scheduled to depart the suit-up room until T-minus 3 hours and 24 minutes, so they have a fair amount of time in here. So you mentioned Jasmin's children. All of these crew members have kids. And last year, Satoshi even became a grandfather. Oh, congratulations to him. Yeah, pretty exciting. So I'm sure they have lots of family members watching right now and getting ready for this flight. There you can see all of the stickers that I mentioned coming out of the building. Those are the ones you said that they sign? Yeah, and their cars will be waiting out there. They'll have a receiving line.
Core on countdown. Lyo seals have been removed and installation is complete. We are on schedule.
So you mentioned folks watching from Japan, it's actually 1 o'clock in the afternoon there. So this is a great time to take in some launch coverage. Although for us, it's, midnight.
Yeah, I was thinking about that yesterday. For the Europeans and the Japanese, this is much kinder hours than it is for us. But hey, any time of the day or night is a good time to go to space.
Absolutely. Now we're looking down the hall from crew quarters, and you'll notice there's some art along the walls there. And former Space Shuttle astronaut, NASA astronaut Nicole Stott led a campaign to get some of these wonderful paintings, space-themed paintings, put up on the walls. And it's really a nice touch, I would think, as you're walking down that hall before you get in the elevator and come out to the Teslas.
Yeah, absolutely. Those were new as of a few years ago. I remember seeing them being installed, and it really is nice to add a little bit of current flair and something that represents a lot of different communities to this historic building. Staying in crew quarters, I'll never forget the first time that I stayed there. As a new astronaut, when you get to stay in that building for the first time, where so many astronauts before you have stayed on their final week of that night, those nights leading up to the space flight, it really is an incredible feeling. And you kind of feel like you've made it. Okay, I'm really an astronaut now. Here I am in crew quarters.
Yeah, how about that? It's unspectacular in its decor, right? It is, when I went through there and looked at it, very much they look like dorm rooms. But the history, I take it, and I take your point, knowing that so many big names and historic names in the past have gone through there, that's pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, they aren't really updated or fancy by any means. They kind of look like they're still back in probably the 80s kind of thing, but it's kind of nice. It gives you that nostalgia, and I think we all take a lot of comfort there.
Well, we're looking at the back of the SpaceX, one of the SpaceX Teslas that will be going out to the pad, and apparently now we have the custom license plate. It's bye.
And so there'll be different license plates, different messages on all 3 of the cars. So we'll have to see what the other ones are. But I believe there's always a nod to the crews as well.
Yeah.
That was something I just found out for this launch. So I would expect to see a 7 somewhere.
And maybe that's on one of the other cars.
Yeah, maybe there's.
I
don't think there were 7, but maybe there's a combined. I don't know.
You might be onto something there.
We'll have to see.
We'll have to take another look at that license plate.
Yeah, remember for Crew 2, the 3 cars were reduce, reuse, and recycle. So I really like that message.
Yeah, that's good.
Positive messaging. I think I saw Pam Melroy out there. She, of course, is the Associate Administrator for NASA, so the Deputy Administrator for NASA. So great to see her.
And a former Space Shuttle astronaut.
Yes, very accomplished space flyer.
You mentioned crew quarters. It's a facility that is 26,000 square feet. So it's a big space.
Yeah, we've got a full kitchen in there. They make us some delicious meals. That's one of the things that happens with the crew on the lead up. I think we talked a little bit about their schedule the day of. They have various meetings and a weather meeting and that kind of thing. But that day before, they also have what we call the ultimate meal. So you get to make a request of whatever it is that you want to eat for that meal the day before you launch. And I'm actually not sure. We should have found out what it was that they each requested. So each astronaut can actually request a different meal as well.
Yes, and I have a little thing about their food. What we do know is that Andy and Satoshi are bringing food from their home countries along with them, which is nice. Jasmin says she's bringing some Persian food that she's going to share with the crew once she gets up there. And
Yeah, like we talked about, those meal times are incredibly meaningful for us. So it's a great opportunity for everybody to come together. Like you just said, each of those countries, I'm sure there'll be a little bit of ethnic flair to each of those meals. We also share food with the Roscosmos cosmonauts. They have a different food supply as well, so we can kind of trade back and forth when you get a little bit tired or something. But we get that question all the time about the food in space, and I think people think that it's pretty terrible. But I can tell you it's actually really delicious.
Speaking of which, Jessica, we have a question about food.
All right.
So let's pop that up. That came in on social. Perfect timing. Tina says, will the crew have dinner during their cruise to the space station?
Yeah, so the number of meals or snacks that they eat kind of depends on the duration of their phasing to get to the space station. So they have various food items with them, and they have certain ones that are more accessible than others, so they can kind of reach in and grab whatever it is that they have. I'm not certain exactly what they did pack, but I think they can make some requests as well. They don't have a food warmer on the Dragon vehicle, so it's usually something that doesn't really need to be reheated that still tastes okay.
And our social participant who asked that question, she is actually here participating in a NASA social at Kennedy Space Center, which is an event we do for launches, invite various influencers and social media account holders to come out and participate in activities in and around the Space Center, as well as take in a launch. So she was right there, you know, watching the coverage, presumably, I guess, on her phone when she asked that question.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to help share in the mission, help share the mission with everybody. And through social media, so many people are communicating that way today that it's great that we have all of these people that can help spread our NASA message and share in the excitement of this exploration.
Absolutely. So we're T-minus 3 hours and 26 minutes. You're watching NASA's coverage of the Crew 7 launch to the International Space Station. I had their patch on the other day. I think that's what it was.
Well, hey, Crew 6 is eagerly awaiting their arrival.
Indeed they are. And in about 7 days, we'll be coming back down to Earth. But today we're focused on Crew 7, getting up to the International Space Station. You're looking outside of astronaut crew quarters here at the Kennedy Space Center, where we are awaiting the walkout of the astronauts on their way to the International Space Station. Here are the doors to crew quarters that Jessica mentioned earlier, and you see the patches around the doors and up there around the meatball. They're scheduled to walk out at exactly 3 hours and 20 minutes. So we've got about 5 minutes until they walk out of there.
All right, 5 more minutes.
You were talking about, of course, a lot has been made about the multi-international crew here, which is impressive. It's the first time in a Crew Dragon has had one person from a separate country. But I did some research, got a hold of the historian at Johnson Space Center, and she was telling me that if you go back to the space shuttle program, there was actually a space shuttle launch that was more diverse for nationalities, and it was STS-84. The reason is that flight included C. Michael Foale, a British American, Alina Kondakova, a Russian, Jean-Francois Clairvoy, French, and the remainder of the crew were Americans. However, Carlos Noriega was born in Peru. So you've got 5 nationalities on STS-84.
Yeah, you know, that is a central element toward everything that we do. Of course, it is called the International Space Station, but it is something that is so important to all of us. You know, this great example of what can happen when people from different backgrounds, from different places, all work together.
And here they come, the astronauts walking down the hallway at astronaut crew quarters. 3 astronauts, 1 cosmonaut of Crew 7 waving as they go by into the elevator, headed down to the first floor. Behind them, Joe Akaba, I believe that's Norm Knight with the Flight Operations Directorate.
It is.
Core on countdown. Crew walkout and suit-up room departure is in progress on schedule.
It's impossible to not smile when you're watching them walk out with those smiles on their faces, isn't it? It's contagious. You know, we talk about that international element, and another fun fact for you. Did you know that Jasmine, was actually stateless until the 2nd grade? She became a U.S. citizen in the 2nd grade, and until then, she was considered stateless. But she celebrated that big moment by bringing brownies into her classroom.
Oh, she went back, right, to many of the schools that she had gone to when she was a kid and visited with those kids and is taking up some mementos from that. I believe some class pictures from those kids. So I like that tie-in of how she is, you know, both a nod to her childhood and her background.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that many of us try to do, to really make that connection to all the people that you've known all along the way and have helped you get there.
You mentioned the traditions, Jessica. Let's take a look at one of them. Here's the crew signing that mission patch inside crew quarters at the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building there, putting it on the wall, and Jasmine putting her John Hancock on there, and each crew member signing away.
Lots of autographs and signatures to be had when you're going to space and when you come back, something that we all get used to. It takes some getting used to, though, in the beginning. I mean, it's not, I mean, I certainly was not used to people asking me for my autograph before. Getting closer to walkout.
Now just about 90 seconds away from them walking out of astronaut crew quarters. The Teslas are queued up. The security escort is ready.
Now, were they black Teslas last time? I know for Crew 2 they were white.
Right. They were black for Crew 6, and then they were white for Demo 2 through Crew 5.
Okay.
They changed up the color. SpaceX said, you know, just adding some vehicles to their fleet.
And I bet they've got their playlists all lined up as well.
They do indeed, and I'm glad you asked about that.
Yeah, another one of the traditions. You got to be listening to some loud jamming beats when you're headed out, and it's such a cool.
Is that?
It's such a cool feeling. It really helps get you psyched up. I know I love music and certainly thrive off it. Since I was the astronaut support person for Crew 2, I did actually ride out in the Teslas with the crew, and it is such a cool feeling. You have lights and sirens kind of blaring with your escorts. You've got the music going loud. It was night just like this, and you're going out to this impressively lit launch pad. It really gets the excitement flowing and gets you pumped up.
I'm getting pumped up just listening to you because the picture you just painted, wow. I can only imagine.
Yeah, again, it's hard to not feel the excitement.
Well, we're just seconds away from them walking out the doors. You can see them behind the windows. And here they come. Crew 7 taking their first steps outside before their journey to space.
Again, look at those genuine smiles. You really can't hide the excitement.
From left to right, we have Konstantin Borisov, Andreas Mogensen, Jasmin Moghbeli, and Satoshi Furukawa.
Here we go. You can see some of the NASA administrator there, Bill Nelson, Bob Cabana's there, the associate administrator. We mentioned Pam Melroy already. Everybody's there to cheer them on, send them on their way.
Let's listen in a little bit. We've got a microphone down there.
Да, начал, формировать. Нет, вообще нет. Вот сейчас вот стоял, чтобы вас видеть, не расплакаться, немножко отвлекся,
Of course, the astronauts have been in quarantine for the past 2 weeks, so That's why they're standing a set distance away from their family and loved ones.
Yeah, that's right. We want to make sure that, of course, we don't carry any viruses or anything like that with us to the space station. So everybody has been in this strict kind of quarantine protocol leading up to the space flight, and they're continuing to keep their distance now. You see Alex Gerst, German astronaut from the European Space Agency there, and Takuya Nishi, a Japanese astronaut. You can see those blue suits toward the front, helping out, escort the families and with the guests. Both are space veterans, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Red right here. Red right here. You see here.
Double kiss from Jasmine. Probably to her two girls.
Yeah, and I heard Andy speaking Danish to his family.
Yeah, you speak, you're fluent, right, in Russian and Swedish, right?
I do, yes. I speak Swedish, pretty similar to Danish, so sometimes I can understand what Andy and his family are saying.
Did you catch anything?
I did. He said, "We see us, we'll see you." Yeah, I didn't catch what he said at the end there. But Andy's family actually lives just a street away from me, so I see them quite often.
How about that? Yeah. Well, that's nice.
Here they go. Doors are closing.
Well, this is a good time to talk about the playlist. Jasmine is going to be queuing up some Stevie Wonder, Whitney Houston, some hip-hop. She's a big hip-hop fan. And apparently so is Andreas, so that works well for the commander and the pilot, who will be in the 01 Tesla. Satoshi says he'll crank some 80s Japanese pop music. And I put that on my own music app just to hear a little bit. Unsurprisingly, a lot of synthesizer. Just like 80s in America. And then Konstantin says he's going to crank some System of a Down, Pink Floyd.
Look at that. I see Jaws' twin girls. They're wearing little mini SpaceX suits.
Oh,
I have one of those for my daughter as well. They are adorable. They look exactly like the real thing.
No kidding.
You can see them just over at the window right now.
I see,
looking in at Mom. Riding on Dad. Yeah, those playlists they have for the Teslas and perhaps, you know, we on the Soyuz, we create a playlist for inside the vehicles. We're in the vehicle for so long before things get busy in there that we have some music, and it's so nice to hear a couple of the favorite songs from each of your different crewmates, lots of different styles of music, and those songs that are really important to you.
We got a social question. If you have one, send it to us. Hashtag AskNASA on YouTube, Twitch.
See those outfits with the hood and everything. Yeah,
yep.
The hood for the helmet. They're really great.
Cute.
Got to dress like Mom. Be ready for game day.
Oh, absolutely. And I imagine that helps a lot with this moment. Of course, they're quite young. But, you know, with children of a certain age, understand that there's some risk involved, and astronauts have to have that conversation with older children.
Yeah, I'm sure it gives them something to identify with. You know, they're wearing the same outfit as Mom today and ready to cheer her along for her launch.
So in the first Tesla, we've got the closeout lead and 2 suit technicians. In the second, the commander and pilot. And the third, the mission specialist, 1 and 2. And bye. They go. Bye, bye.
I think you need a longer bye.
You nailed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
There they go. And so as the crew departs the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building, this begins the 20-minute drive with a full security escort across NASA's Kennedy Space Center to Launch Pad 39A. So let's learn more about the crew in their own words. This may be Jasmin Moghbeli's first space flight, but the Crew 7 commander's resume is more than just a little impressive. Let's take a closer look.
I think the reason we explore space in this international way is because it's a human thing to explore. Humans have always wanted to push the boundaries. We're curious beings. We want to know what is out there. My name is Jasmin Moghbeli. I'm the commander of NASA's SpaceX Crew 7 mission to the International Space Station. I was born in Bad Nauheim, Germany. My parents left Iran during the revolution and then ended up in Long Island, and Baldwin, New York is where I grew up. I always loved team sports from a really young age because you rely on one another, and that's something that I think is really important to know going forward in your career. Becoming an astronaut has been a dream of mine since I was in elementary school. But you think about a lot of kids say they want to be an astronaut in elementary school, but it just never went away for me. I loved physics and learning about how the world works. I went on to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, studied aerospace engineering there, and then joined the Marine Corps after that. I wanted to fly jets, and wondering why would anyone want to fly helicopters when you can go fly jets. I thought you had to be a jet pilot to become an astronaut, and I wanted to still keep that door open. I actually went to watch STS-116 launch while I was waiting to start flight school, and Sunny Williams happened to be on that flight, and as I was reading the bios of the different crew members, I realized she was a Navy helicopter pilot, and from that point on, I went full steam ahead. NASA announced they were going to be selecting a new class of astronauts. It seems like such a long shot, but I figured I had just as much chance as anyone else. The hardest part of going through selection is the waiting between rounds to hear back. Each time my phone would ring with a Houston number, I'd have to kind of take a second to compose myself. They asked, would you like to come join the 22nd group of astronaut candidates? And I don't think I've ever had such a strong physiological reaction to something. Of course I said yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, your newest astronaut, Jasmin Moghbeli.
I joke sometimes with the members of Crew 7 that we get along so well that we've never had a disagreement about anything. All four of us are so proud to represent what is possible when we come together. Ultimately, everything we do is to benefit the Earth.
And this is the second launch to space for the pilot of Crew 7, Andreas Mogensen. He previously flew on the ISS mission in 2015. Here's more on the Copenhagen, Denmark native.
We explore the world not just physically, but also mentally by doing experiments that increase our knowledge of the world and the universe. And that comes from a need to understand the world that we're part of and a basic curiosity that I think all humans are born with. My name is Andreas Mogensen, and I'm the pilot of NASA's SpaceX Crew 7 mission to the International Space Station. I was born in Copenhagen, Denmark, but I spent 3 years in Thailand, 2 years in Singapore, 5 years in California. When I moved to California as a kid, I started learning about NASA and the space shuttle program and of course the Apollo missions to the moon. And I was fascinated and hooked immediately. I knew that that was my dream, to become an astronaut. After too many years in one place, I can feel this itch and this need to travel again. And so I ended up working in the Congo and in Angola, where I worked on an offshore oil rig for a couple of years. Exploring space is not just about understanding the solar system and the universe and preparing the way for our return to the moon and our future missions to Mars, but it's also about understanding who we are and understanding our home world, the Earth. It's difficult to describe Crew 7 in a few words, I think, because we gel so well together. We seem to have very similar personalities, very easygoing, very laid back. It's almost as if we've known each other for years and years and years and have lots of experience flying in space together. I did have moments to myself during my 10-day mission in 2015 where I spent time in the cupola looking down at our beautiful Earth, but also out at the night sky. When you look out at the night sky from this space station, you see billions and billions of stars, and it's very, very impressive. And it also gives you a sense of how large the universe is, how infinitely large it is. And it very quickly puts things in perspective. You very quickly realize how small and almost insignificant the Earth is, and how small and insignificant we all are in relation to what's out there, simply because the universe is so large. And I think that is exciting, because when something is as large as the universe, it must also mean that there are so many exciting opportunities and exciting discoveries waiting for us in the future.
Impressive candidates, the pilot and commander. Now you see Crew 7 on the move, passing in front of one of the most iconic buildings we have here at the Kennedy Space Center. That's the Vehicle Assembly Building. And
seeing that building always impresses me. It never gets old. Even last night when we were driving, I have my first sight of the Vehicle Assembly Building coming over here on site. It always just, you know where you are. Here I am at the Kennedy Space Center. There's going to be something good going on tonight.
Absolutely, and this is the view the astronauts have as they pass by the Launch Control Center. And as they pass the VAB, we are, of course, reminded, Jessica, as you know all too well, this is the same path that Artemis II astronauts, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen, they will take on their way to Pad 39B for Artemis II's return to the moon.
Yeah, it is incredibly exciting. And look right there. We have a beautiful view of the moon right now. That is gorgeous and such an inspiration.
Absolutely. And this is the same sight that the astronauts will see here. It is a clear Florida night. Winds are calm. We are 95% go in terms of weather. Nothing on the radar that looks like it will interfere. And as you mentioned, Jessica, that is a great look at the moon. We're looking at it from our host desk here, and certainly you know the crew that we're looking at here on the screen can see that moon from their view.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks to be about a little over a half moon, and it is fairly well illuminated.
Yeah.
It's pretty bright up there.
In a couple of weeks, I believe we're headed towards a blue moon, which only comes around every
once in a blue moon.
Every once in a while. Thank you very much.
You know, the moon is even more beautiful from the space station.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, you know, it's not obscured by the atmosphere. You have a more direct view since you don't have that obscuration, and it is absolutely gorgeous. You feel like you're closer to it. You know?
How about that?
The moon is 250,000 miles away, and we're only about 250 miles up from the Earth. So you're really not much closer to the moon, relatively speaking, but you feel like you're closer because of that view, that pristine view without the atmosphere. And there it is on the screen.
That's the view we've been talking about, and thank you to our Kennedy production team for getting that shot. It is a beauty and a reminder of exactly the exciting mission in Artemis II that is right around the corner, end of next year. Certainly preparations are happening right here at the Kennedy Space Center for Artemis II. But we are focused tonight on Crew 7 and their launch, and they are only about 3 hours from lifting off from Pad 39A. Talking now about the mission specialists. He was inspired to be an astronaut when he saw the Apollo moon landing on TV as a child, and now this is his second space flight. We're talking about Satoshi Furukawa.
I think it's an instinct for human beings to broaden their boundaries and areas of activities. I think it's like the age of discovery. My name is Satoshi Furukawa. I am a mission specialist for NASA SpaceX Crew 7 mission to the International Space Station. I was born in Yokohama, Kanagawa, which is right south of Tokyo. I was a very active kid. There were many mountain areas around the area I grew up, and so I love outdoor life. I played all day in the mountains from sunrise to sunset. The first human landing on the moon when I was 5 years old. I thought it was a great moment for humankind. I had a longing for space from my childhood. I wanted to be an engineer or an astronomer until my high school life. And when I was 17 years old, I had a chance to talk with my uncle, who is a medical doctor. And what impressed me was he told me that it is my happiest moment when a patient gets better and discharges. So I changed my future path and wanted to be a medical doctor because I would be able to positively affect people's life. February 1998, when I was working in a night shift in a hospital, TV newscaster mentioned that there would be new Japanese astronaut recruitment. Those selected would stay on board the International Space Station for 6 months and conduct many scientific research. I felt strongly, I'd like to do this job. My wife said, do your best. So I applied the audition. The moment I was selected as a Japanese astronaut candidate, you are hired, you are selected. It was the happiest moment in my life. Crew 7, we are international crew members living and conducting many scientific researches on the space station to benefit people over the world and also future space explorers. We are going to use the space station as a test bed for the future human exploration to the moon, Mars, and beyond. I am very proud of being a part of this excellent team of international partners and also researchers, engineers, flight controllers, flight directors, and so on. Because working as a team and working together, we can accomplish the big mission.
And here's a great shot, Jessica, rolling up to the rocket where you can see it right out your window.
Yeah, that's a great moment. They're arriving there on the pad, and once they get out of the cars and come around, they'll get that first unobscured view out. Any good astronaut or cosmonaut always has a Sharpie with them. I don't think there's a Sharpie pocket on this suit, but the technicians are handing them Sharpies to get this job done.
Yes, in fact, it's on the to-do list. Make sure that the Sharpie is in the white room. And you saw briefly Satoshi holding his arm up, and those zippers. They have zippers on each arm, zippers on the leg. Those got to be zipped up, nice and secure, so that that pressure suit functions exactly as needed.
Yeah, there's actually 2 layers of zippers. That was probably just the external one, so there's a redundancy there. The main pressure is held by the lower set, the more internal set of zippers. Another critical component of the way we do
Core on
things at NASA.
countdown. Seat 1 and Seat 4 are beginning their ingress into Dragon. We are on schedule.
You know, safety always comes first. We always have a lot of built-in redundancy to each system, including the spacesuits, to make sure that we can keep everyone on board safe. Another big difference that I'm sure Andy and Satoshi are feeling right now is the difference of the seats between Dragon and the Soyuz spacecraft. You know, you have a much more natural kind of sitting position in Dragon, a lot roomier for you to stretch your legs a little bit. You know, their heels will actually be kind of clipped in. Not clipped, but there's a little runner there that you slide your heel in. It's a little notch in the boot. You slide that onto the boot plate to help secure your feet for the launch and landing process. But while they're sitting there on the launch pad, they can take a foot out if they want, stretch a little bit, and move around.
Kind of like a ski boot and a ski or cycling shoes that have those.
Yeah, kind of like that cycling shoe, but a little bit of a different mechanism. It's just kind of a front to back slide. You can see Andy looking up at the displays there. Looks like he's configuring something or checking something on the monitors. And Satoshi and Konstantin getting strapped in. They have their little satchels, that's what they call them, on their knee there. They have a tablet, so they have procedures on the tablet. If they have a few small items that they might need during the ascent, they can have them in that little satchel as well.
If you're just joining us, you're watching live coverage of NASA's SpaceX's mission known as Crew 7. Good morning to you. It's 12:48 Eastern Time here in Florida. And we're showing you live coverage here at the Kennedy Space Center. I'm NASA's Daryl Nail, joined by NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, giving us some great insight tonight. If you'd like to ask a question of Jessica, just jump on our social media channels, Facebook, X, and YouTube. Put in the hashtag #AskNASA that you can see at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get that question on the air.
Here's some helicopters in the distance, maybe clearing the range, checking up on things, making sure that everything is good in the surrounding area. The Ninja in there making those final configuration checks, making sure the crew is strapped in correctly to be safe and comfortable.
Another one of the key components on making their way into the Dragon is being aware of FOD, right? Foreign object debris. That's a big deal in space flight. They wear special pads on the bottom of their boots that come off once they go in. And then, of course, those technicians want to be aware of anything that falls off the astronauts and make sure that they collect it. You certainly don't want something floating around inside the Dragon when you're launching.
Yeah, and it's true. Everything floats. I remember that when we made it to space, and you never forget that moment when you first experience weightlessness, but everything experiences weightlessness. So any little particles that were down on the ground that you don't even see, you don't even notice because they're on the floor, everything kind of starts lifting up and coming up. So you really want to avoid having anything else in there that can float up and get lodged somewhere in the hardware or get in your eyes or something like that. But stuff you never really think about, here on Earth. Those are the little things that make living and working in space more difficult, but a lot more fun as well.
Do you remember anything in particular that floated up that you weren't expecting?
No, not really that I wasn't expecting, but that moment, I didn't know about the little particles or dirt pieces on the floor or stuff like that. I hadn't really thought about seeing those things lift up, but I had my tablet strapped to my leg, and I also had a little stylus that was on a lanyard strapped to that. Your pencil or stylus is floating there in front of you, and you never forget those initial moments of weightlessness. Pretty dramatic when you have that last engine cut off and suddenly you're in weightlessness and it's prolonged. Almost everybody has been on a parabolic flight at least before their mission. So you've had some periods of weightlessness, but those are usually only about 30-35 seconds. So you don't have that prolonged feeling. It's totally different. I felt like a bat hanging upside down, and because the blood is all rushing to your head.
Yeah.
Because, of course, gravity is not pulling it down to your feet like it's doing for us sitting down here on Earth. Like you're hanging off the monkey bars, that kind of feeling of all the blood rushing to your head, and then it just doesn't go away. You kind of get used to it, and your body adapts a bit and becomes accustomed to the feelings, and you have a little bit of a redistribution of your body fluids, so things change over time. But, yeah, I just felt like I was hanging upside down, and here you are.
You notice that, I've noticed that when I'm watching interviews on the International Space Station, you know, some astronauts will look fuller in the face, and that's got to be exactly what you're talking now. You know, their blood pressure and all the pressure of the fluids internally are now going to distribute differently in space, right?
Yeah,
you actually look different.
Yeah, the pressure kind of remains the same, but you have a redistribution of where the fluids are. So
Okay.
yeah, exactly. You have this upward shift because we're not pulling things down with gravity. So yeah, some people have a much fuller face.
Yeah.
I thought it was great. You know, it gets rid of those under eye bags and wrinkles. Very flattering, microgravity.
Okay. I remember what you did on International Women's Day. You wore a dress.
I did. Pretty sure that was the first dress in space.
I think it was. And that clip really stands out online.
Well, I think it's important, you know, to represent everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so nice about the makeup of our office and of the partner agencies now is that you do have so much diversity in the office. Astronauts don't just look like one thing anymore. They don't come from one mold. You know, we have people in our office that are, you know, still the traditional military test pilots like the first astronauts, but we have scientists of all types. We have medical doctors. We have engineers. We have men. We have women. We have people from all different ethnicities and backgrounds. And, you know, that makes it just a much more interesting place to work. There are so many studies on the ground, right, that show that we have more successful, more productive teams when we have that kind of diversity and actually much more job satisfaction as well.
Mm. I believe we have a social question as the astronauts are getting comfortable in their seats, got their harnesses on. Coming up in a little bit, we'll be articulating their seats up to launch position. And here's our question from Savannah again, who is here taking everything in with the NASA social group. How is it decided, Jessica, who gets to go up on each designated mission?
Well, it's certainly not decided by us, I can tell you that. And we have a chief astronaut for each space agency, and you know, for us that's Joe Akaba. We talked about him. We saw him in the suit room. And basically that chief gets to decide who is the right person to fly for each mission, and we get approval from people above him, his bosses as well, but he's really responsible for forming those crews and getting everybody assigned on their missions and making sure that he has a nice crew complement.
And there's certain skill sets. All astronauts, as you mentioned, are not the same, but then there are skill sets that once combined with a crew
Dragon, ready for com check.
are complementary.
Copy, Dragon. Stand by for umbilical comm check.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, now for the space station, we all have the same training. So everybody is trained on everything from science to spacewalks to flying the
CDR, PLT, MS1, MS2. Comm check.
Loud and clear, help me.
Core, loud and clear.
Has you loud and clear. How me?
Core's got you loud and clear.
This one has you loud and clear. How me?
Core's got you loud and clear.
So I have you loud and clear. How me?
Core's got you loud and clear. Umbilical comm checks are complete. Report when ready for seat rotation.
SpaceX Dragon, walkout.
So we just got good comm checks with each of the crew members aboard Crew 7. Going from left to right, we have Konstantin Borisov,
SpaceX Dragon, ready for seat rotation.
Andreas Mogensen,
Copy, Dragon. We will report when initiating.
Jasmin Moghbeli, and Satoshi Furukawa.
And Dragon SpaceX initiating seat rotation.
Copy.
So there they go. With a big wave as they rotate the seats upwards so they can be better configured for launch, of course, and also they'll be able to see their display panels directly in front of them.
Yeah, and the main reason why we want to launch and land in that position is for the G forces, the gravitational forces that we experience. You know, get up to 3 or 4 Gs on launch and landing, on a nominal launch and landing. And when you take those G forces through your chest, so when you're on your back, those forces are coming straight down, so they're hitting through your chest. That's much easier to deal with than if you were sitting straight up, then they were hitting your head. That would really drive the blood out of your head, and that's why, you know, if you're flying a jet, that kind of
Dragon
thing.
SpaceX, seats are in the launch position. You are go for Section 2, suit leak check preparation.
SpaceX Dragon copies, proceeding to Section 2, suit leak check preparation.
So yeah, if you're a pilot and you have those G-forces that you're experiencing while sitting up, the blood can drain from your head, and that's why you can get dizzy or lose consciousness, and you have a G-suit on, or maybe you do different maneuvers to help counter that. So it's much easier on the human body to take those G-forces through your chest. And we train in centrifuges as well so that we become accustomed to what those G-forces are, how they feel, and make sure that you can still feel comfortable, function with what you have to do. For me, for the Soyuz training, we did a lot of that in Star City with the centrifuge. We went up to 8 Gs, and we also did some landing profiles under the G, so you're in the centrifuge and you're controlling where your descent is to make sure, you know, to see what that would really feel like for the real day. And actually, I was pretty surprised. You know, taking those Gs, as we said, through the chest is a lot easier to deal with.
8 Gs is a lot, though.
8 Gs is a lot, and that's a lot more than you would experience on a normal launch and landing, but that would be for the Soyuz for a ballistic entry. If you had something a little bit off nominal with your re-entry and you went into that different type of profile, you could experience around 8 Gs. So that's why we train for that. The SpaceX crews do centrifuge training as well here in the U.S., and I'm not sure what the maximum of that profile is. They probably fly similar. I think they actually fly the real Dragon profile for launch and landing, which would be up to around 4 Gs.
We're getting great stuff from NASA astronaut Jessica Meir as we count down to liftoff of Crew 7. Now just T-minus 2 hours and 25 minutes and counting. But hey, you don't have to be an astronaut to share in this experience, folks. Take a look now as our Crew 5 astronauts explain how you can get your virtual guest passport and be part of the excitement.
Did you know there's been over 1 million registrations in NASA's virtual guest program since May 2020? From your neighbor to the Crew 5 astronauts, you might be surprised who is a NASA virtual guest.
Do you have Mars 2020? I do. Do you have James Webb? Sure do. Do you have Crew 5?
Well, I've got it here, and you guys have it here, but I missed it here.
We conducted over 200 science experiments and technology demonstrations on our mission. We loved being part of Expedition 68. We even remembered a virtual guest passport for Einstein, our freefall indicator, but we forgot to register. I missed the stamp.
Even if you're doing existing research, never miss a stamp from NASA's virtual guest program. Whether you're en route to the International Space Station or located anywhere around the globe, register at nasa.gov/virtual guests to receive updates on missions and milestones. As a virtual guest, you will receive curated resources and a stamp for your passport following a successful launch.
Remember, you only get the updates and stamp if you register.
I joined. I won't miss it next time.
If you missed the QR code, you can jot this website down. Just register on nasa.gov/virtualguest. It's all one word. You can see it on your screen along with the QR code.
Be our guest. We want to have everybody here with us along with our mission. That's incredibly important to us. This isn't our mission, not as the astronauts or cosmonaut on board. This is everybody's mission. All of our agencies, all of our countries, really the entire planet and all of humankind. And we really do take that seriously. It's a lot of responsibility, but we want to be able to share it with everybody. It's an important part of the job. Good view of their boots there. It's the second iteration of the boots, I believe, or maybe even third. The early Demo 2 and earlier missions had a different style boot.
Yes, Andreas Mogensen's knees and boots are prominent in this particular shot. And once they test again, the pressure suits, we'll see those inflate, and the crew members will kind of get a little bit of a zombie look to them. Arms will come up a little bit because, yeah, when your suit's pressurized, it's going to make you look a little inflated.
Yeah, and working against that pressure, it's kind of like squeezing an exercise ball. All of your motions are a little bit more difficult to accomplish in that pressurized state. But of course, that pressurized state is really only there to protect us. If for some reason we had a depressurization in the capsule, at any time during the space flight, those suits would inflate and they would protect us, still provide us with the air that we need to breathe and protect all of the systems of our body. So that's why we wear them. Nominally, during the mission, you would never have it inflated at all, just during these pressure checks to make sure that it works.
You would never wear this suit outside of the Dragon. This is just in case, something breaks the hull or somehow you lose your atmosphere inside the Dragon.
Right, absolutely, that's correct. So the spacesuit that we wear to do spacewalks on the space station, the Extravehicular Mobility Unit, or the EMU, much different than these suits.
Dragon, we copy and concur 4 good suit leak checks. Closeout team will be performing its final closeout steps. You are go to proceed to Section 4 and report when ready to close the side hatch.
Dragon, also proceeding with Section 4 side hatch closure.
Good news. 4 good checks. You can hear Jasmin speaking to the ground and getting ready for those next steps.
And the SpaceX team and Crew 7 is right on schedule. We got a split view now. On the left, you're looking inside the Dragon spacecraft, Crew 7, and on the outside, technicians working to inspect the seal, both on the inside of Dragon and on the outside, before they close that side hatch.
Dragon crew is ready for side hatch closure.
Yeah, like you mentioned before, really important.
Copy, Dragon. Crew is ready for side hatch closure. At this time, we are also going to proceed into our pre-launch comm checks.
Want to make sure nothing is along that hatch seal. Even a hair, something as small as a hair, can disrupt the seal. Another reason why those ninjas are all really covered up, so that they don't, have anything fall in when they're going in and out of the hatch.
In fact, we did have a hair breach the seal and had to reopen it up on a previous mission and get it cleaned out.
Exactly. Another reason why we do these checks, to make sure everything is in the proper configuration before we go.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
SpaceX Dragon has you loud and clear. How me?
Core has you loud and clear. TDRS comm check is complete. Stand by for comm checks with DC, MD, and LD in the launch configuration.
Dragon DC on countdown 1, comm check.
DC Dragon has you loud and clear. How me?
DC loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with MD.
Dragon, MD on countdown 1, comm check.
MD Dragon has you loud and clear. How me?
MD loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. Dragon, MD on Dragon to ground, comm check.
MD Dragon has you loud and clear. How me?
MD loud and clear. Stand by for comm checks with LD.
Dragon LD on countdown 1, comm check.
LD Dragon has you loud and clear. How me?
LD loud and clear. Stand by for comm check over Dragon to ground. And Dragon LD on Dragon to ground, comm check.
LD Dragon has you loud and clear. How me?
LD loud and clear. Let's go fly.
Let's do it.
And Dragon SpaceX launch configuration comm checks are complete.
Dragon copy.
So we just had the communication checks across the ground stations and the TDRS satellite network. Need a lot of ways to be able to communicate with a spacecraft when it's accelerating at a high rate of speed going up to space, and then of course once it's in orbit. You're watching live coverage of NASA and SpaceX's Crew 7 mission to the International Space Station from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. NASA's Daryl Nail joined by NASA astronaut Jessica Meir as we count down to liftoff. Crew 7 got up early this morning, T-minus 7 hours. Had their medical checks, their pre-launch meal. Got suited up at roughly around T-minus 4 hours. Drove out to the pad. Arrived at the pad at right around T-minus 3 hours and change. And since then, they've gone up the launch tower and into the Dragon, where they are strapped in, secured, had their suit leak checks, individual comm checks, and spacecraft communication checks. And now we are awaiting the closure of the side hatch. And we've got a range of time in which this can happen.
Yeah, we're looking pretty smooth so far. Those good leak checks, good comm checks. Crew is all situated and ready. I think those feelings of anticipation are building up now as they start thinking about what's going to happen in 2 hours and 13 minutes from now.
It will be exciting, and we will have all the best views. It certainly will be exciting, and we'll have all the best views as they go into space. If you're just joining us, you're watching live coverage of SpaceX and NASA's Crew 7 mission to the International Space Station from here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. We have beautiful weather for launch. We are 95% go. It doesn't get any better than that, Jessica.
Wow, I don't think I've heard a number that high for a while. Yeah, sounds great.
The 45th Space Wing started going to increments of 5 percentage points. They used to do just 10, but then they changed it to 5. Now the best you can get, it used to be 90%. Now it's 95%.
All right.
Can't ever get 100, though. It just has to be, 95.
Well, we've got a lot of overachievers on board. That's probably difficult for a lot of people in our office not to get that 100%. It is Florida, though. It's always unpredictable around here with winds, with thunderstorms, clouds. Luckily, we don't see any of that tonight. Or this morning, I guess I should say.
This morning, indeed. 1:15 a.m. Eastern Time right now here on the East Coast of the United States. If you're watching over in Europe or Japan, well, it's closer to the afternoon, especially over in Japan. Of course, we have JAXA astronaut Satoshi Furukawa. That nation, a strong participant.
It's 7:16 a.m. in Copenhagen, so Andy's fans are probably waking up. What a great way to start their day over there in Denmark. Great start to a weekend on a Saturday morning.
Absolutely. Wake up, have a cup of coffee, and watch your countrymen go to space. And once Andy, speaking of Andy, once he arrives at Space Station, he'll be able to take over as commander of the International Space Station. That's quite a responsibility.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's a nice experience to be able to have some different representation in those roles. He's not the commander of this vehicle, but he'll be the commander on board the ISS, and each of those carries a lot of different responsibilities. And so our next step will be closing that side hatch. Is that right? Waiting for that move?
Yeah, that's right. We expected that at T-minus 2 hours and 13 minutes, but they have a window of time in which they can close that side hatch. And then they'll pressure test it, do the leak check on the side hatch. There's a lot of margin built in to the timeline. So that in case they have something come up, they have time to work it. We've seen that happen on a few missions prior.
Getting some more thumbs up from the crew. More waves.
And Dragon SpaceX, the closeout team is taking its final steps in preparation for side hatch closure. Stand by for transition to pad hatch closed. Ensure that all items are secure from now through launch.
SpaceX Dragon copies. All items are secure.
Just like we mentioned, want to make sure that things aren't going to be floating away from them in the launch environment. Straps and Velcro are your best friend when you're in space.
I've always likened that call to the stow your tray table and put your seat upright, you know.
No in-flight service for them, but like that question that was asked earlier, there will be water and snacks.
And as we await side hatch closure, if you've got a question for our own Jessica Meir, NASA astronaut, just punch up hashtag AskNASA on the social sites, Facebook, X, and YouTube. Jessica's doing a great job answering those questions and sharing her experience when she went to space. Here's a question at Spacecraft 2-7. What is the main purpose of Crew 7's mission to the space station?
The main purpose of Crew 7's mission is to support the International Space Station in all of its science and operations during their stay there. So what does that mean? You know, now that we are at assembly complete for the space station, which we reached back many years ago, 2011, I believe it was, assembly complete, we have much more time for doing what we call utilization. So any type of scientific experiment or something that is flying as a hardware demonstration, those are our most important objectives. That's science that we are getting done. Of course, you have to do maintenance as well. You need to fix the toilet, change the light bulbs. We don't have those plumbers or electricians coming up to help us out, so we have to be able to do all the work ourselves. We do spacewalks. We have to do certain repairs outside the space station. All of those things are part of a nominal mission. Visiting vehicles will be coming to the space station with all of the cargo on board. We'll have to fly the robotic arm, capture those, and unload them. And we could talk a little bit about the science as well. You know, there are some interesting experiments that are on board with this crew. One of them is the crew themselves. We have a big physiology study called CIPHER. I think we're going to hear more about that later in the broadcast from some of the scientists involved, but that's a comprehensive physiological suite. It's about 14 different studies that are really targeted at comparing and contrasting different mission durations. So, you know, we have had short shuttle missions in the past. We have typically 6-month missions on the space station, and we have a few that were more around the year mark. We want to see if there are differences in different lengths so that we can try to forecast ahead toward our really long duration mission, which will be to Mars. You know, that mission right now with current methods
and
of
Dragon
technology will
SpaceX,
be about 3 years.
we are commencing a health check for the launch escape system. Expect a momentary flight computer state change followed by a transition back to pad hatch closed.
SpaceX Dragon copies.
So when you go to Mars, it takes about 6 to 9 months to get there, 6 to 9 months to get back. You want to spend a good amount of time there on the surface as well to make it worthwhile. So that's why we call it about a 3-year mission. And we want to understand the physiology involved in that kind of length of a mission. So that's really what this CIPHER study is designed to get at. Try to understand the differences between these short and longer. You know, what happens between 6 months and a year? Is there just a plateau that is reached? Do things stop changing? Or do we have a linear increase in certain parameters or that kind of thing? We want to understand more about those experiments. There's a sleep in orbit experiment that sounds pretty interesting. I think Andy will be a subject for that one. I'm not sure, maybe someone else as well. That uses an earbud EEG, an electroencephalogram, to measure brain waves, look at brain activity during sleep. So pretty cool EEG on board. You know, I speculated that it would be so cool to have an EEG on board crew members to see what's happening to the brain when you first go up in microgravity for the first time, because you are navigating in this 3-dimensional environment for the first time. You know, sitting here, of course we're in 3D, but we're not really using things above our head, in the ceiling, on a ceiling, and that kind of thing. On the space station, we use all of the planes. We use the floor, the ceiling, all of the walls, all equally. And so you're navigating in this different way, and these different pathways are really forming in your brain in order to accommodate for that. It was a really interesting feeling I felt during the first few weeks I was in space, where I felt like my brain would actually do these flip-flops. If I went from the floor up to the ceiling and I was working there, you know, here on Earth, when we think about how we navigate and move around, it's all in relation to down, because we have this gravitational vector pointing down toward the Earth. When you don't have that in space, you know, suddenly there's no right or left. And if I'm up on the ceiling working, my brain would kind of reinterpret that as being the floor, or the deck, as we call it on the space station. So then when I, you know, lifted my head up, I didn't know which way to turn, because, you know, I was on the ceiling, but my body felt like it was on the floor. And that takes a couple of weeks for your body to get used to. And I think these new neural pathways are forming. And such an interesting thing for me as a physiologist, because I felt like I could really feel that happening.
And Dragon SpaceX for post-ingress briefing.
Go for Dragon.
Okay, Jaws, we'll keep this one short. At this time, the Dragon team and F9 teams are not tracking any issues, and you couldn't ask for better weather. How copy?
Dragon copies. Good to hear.
So you feel that up in space. You feel the difference of how your brain has this remarkable plasticity. Your brain can adapt in this new way. And after a couple weeks, I didn't feel that anymore.
You're saying you actually felt?
Yeah, you could sort of feel this flip-flop. It's a strange thing to kind of describe, but you could sense it almost. And then a few weeks later, that feeling was gone, and I was, you know, more effortless in terms of navigating around the space station. You become really graceful in your movements. You know, just the tip of a finger can push you off toward one direction. So it's really interesting to see how the brain and the body are so moldable and adaptable and ready to just, you know, take on whatever new environment it comes across.
Wow. And that CIPHER study that you mentioned, that in dual components there, right? Not only physical, but also psychological.
Yes.
That's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of those factors are involved in that study. So it should be pretty comprehensive and give us a lot of data that will be really critical toward those future missions.
We'll learn more about that study coming up in our show inside of T-minus 1 hour. So stay.
Ensured the station is ready to welcome Crew 7. Leading the team inside the room right now is Flight Director Chris Dobbins. He will lead the joint NASA-SpaceX Go, No-Go poll